Sure. So this will be recorded. And if you're signed up for it, so if Mary has your email, you'll get a copy to it, you'll get the slides, and you'll get the PDF with a click-through link that you can go to KnowBe4. The KnowBe4 training, they always have free stuff available, but they will have kind of more information specifically curtailed to cybersecurity through the month of October. It is a 4-week thing, but you can click through. So I would recommend doing at least a couple, 1 week, a couple the next week, if it's something you're interested in. Don't try and cram it all in at the end, because whenever I do that, that's how I forget things. Some of you may have been in our internet security class, which the library also runs. That's kind of similar, kind of not. The internet security class is more specific to an individual. This cybersecurity class is a little more holistic and kind of useful if you have employees or if you want, a business to kind of take advantage of some more security features. As I said earlier, October is Cyber Awareness Month. So at least once a year, we will have a class like this. And we'll at least have a class like this that kind of goes over a new tool that you can go to learn more every October. This year, it's KnowBe4. So CISA, or however you want to pronounce it, is kind of the one of the US agencies that's in charge of cybersecurity. And since 2004, the President of the United States and Congress have declared October to be Cybersecurity Awareness Month. CISA also puts out information. It's a little bit more dense than the KnowBe4, but I do find it interesting that the US government has made it an important thing to be at least aware of cybersecurity. KnowBe4, before I start, plugging a company that is willing to take your money, they do have a lot of free options. You can go to knowbe4.com. That is the number 4. And from there, About Us page. KnowBe4 is the world's first and largest new school security awareness training and simulated phishing platform. This is generally more useful and more targeted towards businesses and small businesses. But they do have a lot of good tutorials and good walkthroughs of how individuals can protect themselves online. Just in case, and in order to set expectations, cybersecurity professionals, it is a full 4-year degree in undergrad, and it is a 2 to 4 year master's program. So, we're not going to learn that amount of information condensed down into a 1-hour session. And in case anyone, knows anyone who's into computers, cybersecurity is a growing field, obviously, and I believe it was the #1 growing field last year. And I have a little infographic on the bottom, kind of showing the salary ranges. Of course, salary ranges go below, go above, but you're looking at, around $100,000 to $200,000. For the end of your career with cybersecurity. This is an interesting slide. I threw this in just because it has big dollar amounts, but basically the question is, why should companies care about cybersecurity? And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have the top 12 publicly available information, at least how much money people have paid in fines due to their cybersecurity. The biggest one, $1.19 billion, is DD Global. That's a Chinese company. All of the rest of these companies you probably are familiar with. So Amazon, they violated GDPR in Europe. Equifax, they lost like 500 million customers' information. Instagram, something to do with children and tracking information about that. T-Mobile, I honestly forget, but these are very massive dollar amounts. So cybersecurity is a big, big thing, and even some companies don't get it right, even when the fines are in the millions and millions of dollars.
And Tim, the fines go to governments, right? Not to individuals.
It depends. So some of these were class action lawsuits. So like the Equifax was a class action lawsuit. Home Depot was, in addition, a class action lawsuit. Capital One class action lawsuit. But yeah, if it's just a pure fine, the money goes to the government.
What's the fine for?
The question in the classroom, what's the fine for?
Violating cybersecurity practices. So basically, it can be a whole host of things. Generally, the fines will be for violating a security act that a country or set of countries have. So Europe has GDPR, which basically stops companies from tracking individuals with massive amounts of data. And if you violate that, you pay a fine per person. So, for Amazon, if they were to track 500,000 people and it's 20,000 a pop for the infraction, you get massive, massive numbers. Otherwise, these are just completely lax security. So Home Depot got fined and got sued because they basically let somebody walk into one of their businesses. They were able to plug into the network and they were able to gain access to, I believe, all of Home Depot's North American customer base.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So cybersecurity isn't just online, it's also in person, which is wonderful. CIA triad, we're not talking about the US governmental institution. We're talking about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are kind of the three tenets of cybersecurity that are generally agreed upon. And it's a mixture between all of these. So it's a give and take. So confidentiality is generally relating to privacy. You want to stop people who shouldn't have access to information from getting that information. Integrity is you want data that you have to stay the same. You don't want someone else to be able to edit that data before you can then see it or whenever you send it to someone else. And availability. So kind of this is the real stress point, is you can make things incredibly confidential. You can make things, have great integrity, but in addition to that, it's hard to make that data still available to the people who need it. So it's a really big give and take, and that's why so much money is involved in cybersecurity, is because you have all of these stipulations that need to work against each other, yet with each other. The next term that'll get thrown around a lot online is defense in depth. And since I was born and I was at an age where Shrek was awesome, it is like an onion. So you can kind of see on the right-hand side, I have a little image, and you can think of each layer of the onion as a new security thing. So each layer needs individual security, and that kind of protects everything. So we'll be going over these in kind of more detail later, but the top part is the most important part, and that's the policy, procedures, and awareness. This is generally thought to refer to people. So you can have the most secure system in the world, but if someone clicks on a link that they shouldn't, that security sometimes isn't enough. So the biggest thing you can do to protect yourself is you can be very aware of what you should and shouldn't do online. And that's one of the things that KnowBe4 is very good with. KnowBe4 is basically a training platform that is training you on how to be more secure, regardless of any fancy equipment and firewalls and all this security that's around you. You kind of have to be cognizant of things you should and shouldn't do online. All right, defense in depth, still an onion. So these are kind of, if you break out those layers and you think about what do they actually mean, this is what the breakout looks like. So we have firewalls, we have IDS and IPS systems, endpoint detection, network segmentation, least privilege, strong passwords, and patch management. And we're going to be going over these a little bit more in depth in the coming slides. I also have a link to a website that kind of goes over what all these mean in greater depth if you want to, do reading after class. The first thing we're going to talk about are firewalls. So a short example of what a firewall is it is a hardware appliance or software which controls network traffic. What this allows the firewall to do is to stop malicious activity before it reaches you, your computer, and your network. So these kind of stop you from seeing bad things. These range from kind of cheap to way too expensive. So I'll have later on kind of a little slide with 2 columns. 1, if you're an individual and you don't want to spend a lot of money, and 2, if you're a business and you have money to spend. So firewalls under the EX, the example is something is trying to gain access to your network from the internet, the firewall will block it. So it is the first line of defense if you don't think of yourself as the first line of defense. IDS and IPS, these are intrusion detection system and intrusion prevention system. These are kind of conflated to be the same thing, but they're slightly different. So an IDS just detects that something happens and it lets you know. An IPS prevents it. So it's kind of an additional thing where it detects it and then it stops it. One of the nice things about IDS is you can still do everything as normal. Whereas if you have an IPS, occasionally something won't work and you'll have no idea why, because it's preventing it. And it could be a non-malicious thing. In basic terms, the example is if something weird happens on the network, IT gets alerted. So that's your IT team. IDS and IPS are generally more used in the business sense because you need to know what the error message is in order to understand if it's good or not. And generally you need a decent amount of training in order to decipher that. EDR, endpoint detection and response. That is a really fancy way of just saying antivirus software. So everyone on their computer has antivirus, whether it's built in, like with the case of Windows or Mac, or you can pay a subscription, or sometimes it'll come with your cable provider. And we'll go into individuals a little bit later, like individual companies a little bit later. But basically what a antivirus or anti-malware system does is it's on your computer, something bad gets to your computer, it will either recognize that it's bad and stop it, or it will manually run and look at the entire computer and see what's wrong and get rid of the bad program, the malicious program. All right, so network segmentation is really more for business use. It's the process of having different networks for different tasks. So for example, at your house, sometimes it may actually make sense for you to have 2 separate wireless networks, one for you and your family and one for guests. The reason why is even if your guest is a trusted, friend for the past 100,000 years, both of you are immortal. They could have something on their device, which when it connects to a network, will try and spread to other computers. By having a separation between 2 networks, you won't be able to get an infection from network A over to network B very easily. In a business case, this is really useful because if someone gets into a salesperson's computer, they then aren't able to go on the network and get into the person's computer who's in charge of payroll. So network segmentation is slightly expensive, but in a business sense, it's very worth it. Some of your devices at home So your router, for example, the thing that broadcasts your Wi-Fi network, occasionally they will support having 2 different networks that they can broadcast. And you generally, if you want to be safer, you'll have one network for you and your home devices and one network for everything else. The principle of least privilege. Once again, this is more useful in a business case where you have someone who manages this for you. But the underlying principle is that people and systems should only have access to resources which they need to perform their assigned functions. So if their entire job is inputting data into an Excel spreadsheet, there is no reason why that person also needs access to the payroll system where they can send out money to people. So you basically want to limit everybody and then give permissions gradually. Strong passwords. This is one of my favorite things. We have had multiple classes on strong passwords. And at the end, if anyone wants a little refresher on that, or if we want to see what strong passwords are, we can do that. But basically, if you have a strong password and you have multi-factor authentication turned on, it's increasingly difficult for someone to maliciously gain access to your account. One of the personal and particular caveats to this I have is do not share passwords between different things. So for example, if you could have the strongest password in the world, but if you used that password in Home Depot in 2007, and you had the same password for your online banking, it doesn't matter how strong it was because Home Depot got hacked and people got that password. And what they'll do is they will take your username, which is generally your email address, which you probably use your email address to sign into a lot of things, and they will use that password that they now have, and they will try all of these different companies to see if they can log in. So one thing with passwords, make it strong. We can talk about that later, but also don't reuse passwords, please. Patch management. In the online security class we do, which is separate from this, I have a little spiel about Maersk, which I'm probably butchering the name of still, even though I've been doing this for 4 years. Basically, patch management is the process of updating your computer. So one of the things that software and computer updates provide is increased security. So the example I always give is whatever the shipping company's name is. And they had a system that was unpatched and a hacker got in and caused them $870 million worth of damages. So, you know, it can happen to a big multinational company with 30,000 IT personnel. It can happen to you. Please, whenever Windows says, we have an update, do you want to install? Just hit yes. Whenever Apple says, hey, we have a software update available, do you want to restart your computer? You can say yes, or you can say, you know, later tonight. So just kind of whenever those messages pop up, it is something that's important. And you should update your computers as they request you to update them.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Hold on
So
for a second, Tim. We have some questions.
Yep.
About 2 months ago, I think it was, on the BBC, not on any of our US radio stations, but on the BBC, they announced that Apple was alerting everybody worldwide that there had been a breach of its security system, and they were sending out an update to their operating system. How common is that? I mean, that's the only time I've ever heard of something like that.
it's disturbingly common. It's also kind of underreported because one, whenever a company does that, for the users, it's a very good thing. For their stock price, it is not a good thing.
Right.
So companies have an active incentive to not report these things. So, you know, one of the reasons why some of these companies get fined so much money is because it'll come out, in the example of Target, like 2 years later that they were hacked. And Target was like, we just didn't let people know because we were investigating it. So for 2 years, you know, people could be using those passwords over, which they shouldn't be using anyway. But, you know, your data was stolen. They had access to stuff, and you don't really know what that stuff is. But yeah, so it's common. It is nice when a company comes out and says, hey, this bad thing happened. Please update your device. In the case of Apple, I believe the instance you're referring to was they found through their bug hunter program that there was an issue with their security, and they updated it. And they basically said, hey, we know this is an issue. We're not sure if it's been used. Update your devices, please. So sometimes companies will proactively find an issue with their software and fix it, hopefully before anyone else found the issue with the software.
Thank you.
Did you see the pop-up in the chat?
Are there ever any pop-ups that look official but are really hacks? And the answer to that is yes. So one of the things I like to do at the beginning of the other internet security class we have is make a joke about the only way you can be secure online is if you use scissors, you know, and don't be online. Realistically though, the things like the pop-ups that are fake, the best thing you can do is train yourself with something like KnowBe4. And that kind of gets you in the mindset of, I should probably think about what I'm clicking on. So for example, most of these attacks are very broad. So the malicious people will make a couple of assumptions. One, they'll make an assumption that you're on a Windows computer, because that is the vast majority of the market. The next thing they'll make an assumption on is what piece of software you may have on your computer. McAfee comes with Comcast. A lot of people have Comcast. So they will send a pop-up that says your Windows computer is infected, or they'll send a pop-up that McAfee has found a virus, because they know a vast majority of people have those things. So those, in that case, those pop-ups can look very official. But if you know, hey, I'm on a Mac, and you get a pop-up saying your Windows computer's infected, it's fake. Or if you get a pop-up that says McAfee has detected an intrusion and you don't use McAfee, it's fake. You know, so there are kind of things you can think about like that, that will allow you to narrow down if something is real or fake. But you always have to be cautious.
Tim, I have a question about firewalls. I have an Apple MacBook Pro from 2015. And does it come with a firewall in it? You know?
Yeah, so computers do have firewalls built in. They are not the same level of firewall as dedicated firewalls. And we'll be going over that in the next slide.
Okay.
Especially if you're a business, you will want a actual firewall. The ones that are built into computers are built for primarily usability. So it would be incredibly frustrating for the average person if their firewall was super secure, because it would block a lot of legitimate things. So the firewalls that are built in generally aren't the same standard. Still useful, but they're built more for, you know, 90% of malware. But you still have to worry about that 10% that would get through.
Thank you.
I pulled those numbers out of my head, by the way. That's not a documented percentage there.
There's another question, hold on.
Yeah, Tim, I'm about to get a new computer, MacBook Air, and I just wondering if, because Apple is pretty good about cybersecurity, I think, I'm told. And I just wondered if the hardware companies and their operating systems become better with each new model at improving their security system.
In general. So primarily the updates are software focused. So it's the things that run on your computer.
Right.
At a certain point, your computer will no longer receive security updates, whether it be from Apple or from Microsoft. And that's when I definitely recommend to buy a new computer.
Right.
That's like the end all be all. Your computer is no longer receiving security updates. Please get a new one.
When that is.
What?
I didn't know when that time is.
You can generally find that information online. Also, on one of the classes we'll have, I believe, next month on buying a device. I will be going into that in much more detail. The easiest way to do it, though, is just go into system information in Windows. You go to System and About, and on a Mac, you would go to the top left, click on the Apple icon and go to System Information. You find your model number. You type it into Google and you say, when do security updates stop? Something to that effect. Again, we'll go over that better in the next class. But you basically Google that and it will say, Windows 10 is no longer going to receive updates in 2027. So you're good until then. With Apple, you're generally good for a little bit longer than that. But for like iOS devices, you have about 6 years of security updates. For Android updates, you have anywhere from no security updates to 4 years of guaranteed security updates. So it's also something to keep in mind because a lot of people are doing more and more things on their cell phone these days that you have to, think about your cell phone and iPads and tablets and stuff like that, as well as your traditional computer.
Thanks.
All right. So we're going to continue on. I just do want to point out, I don't have any like hard prices added to these, partially because if you're a business, you'll get better pricing on it because you'll be going through a reseller. And if you're an individual, you can generally try and find these on sale. And also the numbers are decently high, so I don't want to scare people off. The first one we're going to be talking about, and we're going to go through just right down the line like before. First thing we're going to talk about are firewalls. As we go through this next section, on the left-hand side will be the cheap-ish options. On the right-hand side will be the more expensive-ish options. You can think of these also in terms of personal on the left and business on the right, if that makes it kind of make more sense to you. But there's no reason why you as an individual can't buy something on the right-hand side. And also, there's also the caveat that none of these will 100% make you secure. You still need to do something like KnowBe4, where you kind of learn yourself, what is good and what is bad in terms of, email messages you may receive or pop-ups or things of that nature. On the left-hand side, I'll quickly re-go over what firewalls are. So whenever you're at your house, you have your modem, which is generally provided by your internet service provider. So for this example, we'll say Comcast. After Comcast will be your network. Sometimes those modem devices will have a rudimentary firewall. They're generally just as good as the one on your machine, maybe better, maybe worse. But these firewalls are specifically firewalls. They get continual updates for security. You can patch them, you can update them, you can view them, you can edit them, all of that fun stuff. So these are something that you would put before your computer when it comes to internet. So on the left-hand side, we have Cheap-ish. One of the ones I really like recommending is UniFi. So the UniFi system is kind of this very holistic everything bundle. So you can go to them for your cameras for security. You can go to them for door or card readers if you're a business to lock and unlock your doors. You can go to them for your switches. You can go to them for your Wi-Fi, so your access points that you can put everywhere. So you can kind of go there, one-stop shop, do everything you want to do. They have two different sections. They have the security gateway, which is a firewall only. They also have the Dream Machine line, which is kind of a more all-in-one device, which is a firewall. It's an access point, so that gives out Wi-Fi, and it kind of is also an intrusion detection device, an intrusion prevention device. It's like an all-in-one kind of bundle. And again, I'm going to be skipping over a lot of these, just saying the names or a general blurb like I just did. If you have any questions about it, put it in the chat or think about it, write it down, and then whenever we stop, we can definitely, at the end, take as much time as you want and go over individual things. We have a question. So the firewall goes between the modem and your computer. That answer is yes.
And what about the router if you don't have a router in like the UniFi?
Routers are, I mean, you can get a consumer all-in-one, but I just didn't put those on the list because their firewalls are generally not the best. Their primary function is to be a router with a firewall tacked on. Their primary function isn't to be a firewall. So it's helpful, but it's not, something that should really make you sleep well at night. On the right-hand side, expensive-ish. These are more business, and primarily you need something like this if you're a business because of various licenses and licensing you need for security. So SonicWall, WatchGuard, Cisco, Sophos, all of these have good options. And I have model numbers if you want to look up how much these cost and realize that if you're a consumer, you don't want to buy them. They also have yearly recurring costs. So it gets really expensive really fast. IPS and IDS. This slide I put on here full, it's on me. I gave you all this information. If you are a consumer, if you're not using this in a business sense, kind of ignore the next 3 minutes of what I'm talking about. These are incredibly onerous to look at and set up. It's painful. So if you want this for your home and you want a weekend project that will make you lose hair, go for it. If not, leave this to a business thing. So what this does again is it will let someone know that something has been detected on the network. It will either just let that person know or will also try and prevent it. If it tries and prevent it, it will then also send a notification that it prevented this to that person. On the left-hand side is the cheap-ish option. There are a lot of free ones. Free does not mean they're very usable. Again, incredibly difficult. I hate them. The only caveat to that is UniFi at the bottom. It's kind of built in. So if you have that system, you can kind of play around with it and it's more manageable, in my opinion, than the other ones. On the right-hand side, these things get super expensive. But the good ones would be SolarWinds, McAfee, and Palo Alto Networks. I have never used Palo Alto Networks, but the internet said they were good, so I put them on this list. All right, next, antivirus and anti-malware. On the left-hand side, the free-ish. The ish stands for some of these have free versions, but while you're using them, they will consistently remind you, hey, you could pay for me and get a better experience. They're lying. You do not have to pay for them for the free version. But if you do get more things. The ones that come with your computer, I have no idea what Apple's is called, but Apple has one. And we also have Windows Defender. I generally get asked, is free good enough? And the answer to that, because my lawyer said I shouldn't give blanket statements like that, is it's what I use. So that's my response to that. Is free good enough? It's what I use. But as always, you should kind of think before you click on stuff. No matter how good these are, you can always click through it. But on the left-hand side, Windows Defender, Kaspersky, Bitdefender, Malwarebytes. I personally use Windows Defender and Malwarebytes. For work, I really like McAfee, and I really like Sophos. But they're all good options. At the very bottom, you'll see a link that is to avcomparatives.com or .org. It's basically an independent company or organization that has a bunch of computers that are unpatched and completely open to the internet. They have one of these things installed on it, and they see how many infections the computer gets at the end of a month. So you can kind of go on there and see, based on a year, which one caught the most. You can also see which one had the most false positives, which is also annoying. So you can kind of go on there, play around, and see which one would work best for you. Why do I use two? That's a great question. There is a slight difference between antivirus software and anti-malware software. I think it's stupid. I think it should all be named one thing, but there is a difference. So Windows Defender is an antivirus software. What this software will try and do is it will try and see that something has gotten to your computer. It will then check its database and say, that doesn't look good. It will then remove it. So it is always running, and it will always be slowing your computer down, is the important thing. Some of these will use more computer resources than others. That's also something that AV Comparatives checks. So antivirus, always running, will try and catch things as they get on your computer. Anti-malware, on the other hand, is a soft piece of software that you will say, hey, I want you to run every night at 2 a.m. Or it can be something that you manually click on once a week or once a month. It will then go super hardcore, search everything on your entire computer, and say, I think we found one, and kill it. So they kind of do the same thing, but generally antivirus is as something bad is happening, and anti-malware is after it's already there. So that's why I use two.
For Mac, which is the antivirus on that list?
I think it's Malwarebytes.
Well, I have Malwarebytes, but that's what he just described.
Yeah, so Malwarebytes.
Yeah, what's constantly operating for Mac on that list on the left, please?
Yeah, so for anti-malware or antivirus, Malwarebytes does have a paid version that kind of makes it more antivirus-like, where it will do the scanning as things happen. But Bitdefender has an Apple version. Sophos has an Apple version. Norton has an Apple version.
Okay.
Bitdefender has an Apple version. I'm mostly familiar with Sophos, Malwarebytes, Windows Defender, and McAfee. So the left and right kind of, yeah, I probably could have formatted this better. Left and right, the left-hand side is the ones that have like the free version that's good and usable, and the right-hand side is the ones that you can pay for. The only like traditional anti-malware program I have on this list is Malwarebytes.
But there's a Bitdefender free edition for Mac. Is that what
Yeah.
you said? Okay, thanks.
I haven't used it in a couple of years. I assume it's still there, but last I checked, there was, yeah.
Thanks.
The other thing to note is if you have multiple of these running on one computer, it does not make it more secure because these products will look at the other product and try and kill it occasionally. Because if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. An antivirus program doesn't want to be easily removed because then every virus known to man would, as soon as it got on a computer, remove the antivirus program. So they do a lot of things that make them difficult to remove, which to other antivirus programs looks a lot like a virus. So occasionally they'll fight to the death and kill your computer. So that's why I would recommend one of these and Malwarebytes. Or that's what I would use, is one of these and Malwarebytes. All right, network segmentation. You can do this in two ways. One way is cheaper, one way is a lot more expensive. So the ways you can do network segmentation are you can have a switch and you can tell the switch, these ports are network A, these ports are network B, and one device, two networks. Or the more expensive version is you can buy two switches and have them hardware separated. So each switch would be a different network. For home use, you're not really going to worry about this too much. The most you'll worry about it, in my opinion, is the Wi-Fi that I had talked about earlier. If your router allows you to have two separate networks for Wi-Fi, I always recommend that. But as far as switches go, it's kind of whichever one floats your boat. But we can definitely talk more about this if upon request. We had one question, why is Powerbytes not on the list? I assume that's for antivirus and anti-malware. It's not on the list because there are, dozens of these, and it would make the font really, really tiny. And also, I've never used Powerbytes, so I can't, speak to it at all. But if it works, it works. There are a lot of options out there that I don't personally use, so I can't personally add to these things, but they work out very well for other people. Oh, and as again, the left-hand side of this is cheapish, and the right-hand side is expensive. Least privilege. So if you remember, this is the process where, person A shouldn't have the same privileges as person B. And you do this by making everyone have no permissions and then adding permissions as they need them. It's mostly a manual process. If you want me to go into the business side, I can do that. I'm just going to stick with home computer on this one. So best practice, something you can do is you can, when you log into your computer, you can have two accounts. One account would be a basic user account. And basically what that means in the Windows side of things is that they have access to use the computer. They have access to use any program on the computer, but they can't make changes or install new things. The reason why this is really nice is if an antivirus is depending on your user account in order to do things because you have a limited user or not an administrator user, the virus can't do those things. So it can't install itself. It can't really search the network because it doesn't have permissions to do that. So when you have a two account setup, one would be a traditional standard user, one would be an administrator. If you ever needed to do anything on the computer, like install a program, something would pop up and say, hey, you don't have permission to do that. please put in the username and password of someone who does have permission to do that. Once that happens, you would then put in your administrator account, and then that would allow you to make system changes or install or delete programs. All right, strong passwords. So we can go over this if anyone wants, what is a strong password? But in this segment, I basically just have the applications that allow you to not worry about that. On the left-hand side is the free-ish options, and on the right-hand side is the moderately priced options. These aren't insanely expensive, but they're anywhere from like $4 to $12 a month kind of expense. And what these are is these are password managers. The reason why I really like password managers is you have to remember 2 passwords, well, I guess 3 passwords. You need to remember the password to get into your computer or device. You need to know the password to get into your password manager. And I would also say you should know the password to your email account that the password manager is registered to. Apart from that, all of your logins, all of your passwords will be in this password manager. What this allows you to do is have incredibly long and complex passwords without having to remember any of them. So really, really nice. These also will have either applications for your computer, apps for your phone. They will have extensions for your browsers. So for example, you'll go to, and I do not know why it's always Macy's, but you'll go to Macy's and a little icon in the top right of your browser will light up and it will say, we have a password for this. You click on that button and it will then log you into Macy's. So you, in no part of that transaction did you ever have to know what your password was.
If your computer can be hacked, why can't they hack this?
So great question. So one of the nice things about password managers is if you're using them right, you kind of don't leave them open all the time. So someone can get on your computer, but they won't have the login to your password manager, so they can't access your passwords that way. These password managers have the password kept in a secure database that is encrypted, it is obfuscated, it is all sorts of not easy to get into. So it's like essentially like a super vault where all of your passwords are kept. That it's, I mean, if someone wants to get in, they can kind of do whatever they want if you're really targeted, but it's just honestly not worth the hundreds and hundreds of hours it takes to crack into one of these things.
But I just asked the question.
We have another question.
Yep, go
Are
for it.
all of the free, the 4 free apps, are they, do they all work with Mac or which ones work with Mac?
So one of the wonderful things about these is most of these are online for like a in a browser extension sort of format. So it really doesn't care what operating system you're running.
Okay.
So the other answer to that question is, if I were to recommend one of these to my parents, which one would I recommend for the free side? And the answer to that would be Bitwarden.
Yeah.
So the reason why I would recommend Bitwarden to my parents is because it has a really good free version. One of the things you'll often pay for is if you have a 2 family member or more household. One of the nice things you can do is, so I'll just use me and my wife as an example. We can both have access to the password database. But it turns out I'm incredibly secretive, right? And I don't want my wife to have access to all of my passwords. So I can say, I want my wife to have access to this half of my passwords, and she can do the same. So now when I log in, I have access to her Netflix password, she has access to my Disney Plus kind of thing. So you can have a family on one of these, which I think is really useful. So, you know, you're individually not paying each for an individual subscription. You kind of have a family plan, which is a little bit cheaper. At some point, we're also going to have a class on estate planning because Mary's kind of morbid. And password managers are really nice for that. So, because it's increasingly a hassle with how digitally connected our lives are to kind of get all of that information. And you can essentially have all of that in your password manager.
We use Bitwarden at the library and it's very easy to use. It really
Yep.
is.
So all of these, but I'm going to speak primarily about Bitwarden because it's the one, you know, the library uses and the one I would recommend to my parents. You can have it on your computer, you can have it on your phone, you can have it on your other computer. So you don't really need to remember your passwords at any point because on all of your devices, you can have your passwords stored. You make an update to your password on your phone, you go to your computer 5 minutes later, your computer version of Bitwarden now has that password.
Right.
So it kind of syncs it so you never lose a password.
Tablets too. Huh?
Yep. As we're kind of winding down, I do just want to remind people that this class is generally slated for about an hour and we're running up to that. I do book an hour and a half of my time. So as long as people and because I have no regard for Mary's time, as long as people want to ask questions, I'm more than willing to stay and answer any specifics or go over anything that I said we would get to at the end. So continuing on, so if I and my husband have Bitwarden and give access to each other, and if I change a password on a system like Netflix we both use, will it auto change for his access? The answer is yes, if you're using it in like that family kind of mode.
Oh, yeah.
So that's another thing why it's very useful in my opinion. And I do want to reiterate that all of these kind of can do that on the right-hand side. You just have to pay for that. Their free versions don't support families, whereas Bitwarden, the last time I checked, supported the 2-user setup. How do you set up an administrator account? Basically, whatever account you, are you asking for password manager or are you asking for computer?
We had patch management there.
Computer.
Computer, how do you set up an administrator account? On Windows, you would set up 2 users. One would be a standard user, one would be an administrator. On Apple, whatever user you set up first is the administrator, and then you would go into System Preferences, which is the gear icon, and then you would go to Users, and then you would add an additional user, and you would set them to standard user. All right, patch management. The short answer to this is just do it. Like you'll get a pop-up, and I realize some pop-ups are bad, but you know, generally if a pop-up says, hey, this is Windows, can we restart? You have an update, is generally going to be real. So basically the left-hand side free-ish is not really ish, it's just do it. So if it asks you to update, just hit that update button. Expensive-ish is on the right-hand side. This is more for businesses. So this is for businesses or families that have a large amount of computers. For example, I wouldn't want to go into a teenage boy's room and check his or her, you know, gender, whatever, their computer. You know, it's their computer, but what you can do is you can use one of these and make sure it gets the update. This is more useful for a business case where you have, you know, dozens of computers. You don't want to manually go to each computer and hit the update button. That's when you have Nanite or PDQ, where you can make them be pushed. So you can make all the computers have updates. Last slide before the question slide is training. And this is a link to the website you saw me playing around with at the beginning. It's the Know Before website, which has the 4 weeks worth of programs and activities you can do to become more aware of, you know, good and bad habits when it comes to cybersecurity. Now we're on the question slide. So we can go, you know, any direction anyone wants. I do want to point out 159 on the dot, perfect track record. All the judges are impressed.
Woo. Tim, could you go back to the last slide so we could copy down that?
Oh, I'll be sending it to you, so
Okay.
you'll have the live link. Why don't you go to that page if you don't mind? Just to show them a little bit of what they might be looking at. Okay, so you'll get, this is what you'll go to,
Okay,
and I would encourage you to, the understanding URLs, it's a 2.5 minute or so video, and it really sort of breaks apart what you need to understand, because you know, there's a lot going on with URLs, and it's important to know how to evaluate them.
what of all that would you say is more important for just a home user rather than a business?
I would say honestly all of it. So this is geared towards a business client in order to give to their individual staff members. So it's geared for business to have all of their people learn about it. So in that respect, it's also for you. It's also for people at home, because it's geared in such a way to make an individual person better at understanding what to do and what not to do. The other thing I would say is definitely click around. I'm not going to click on any of the training videos. They're generally very short and sweet. They're between 1.5 minutes to 5 minutes. Very, you know, they try and make them somewhat funny. So it's almost funny how not funny they are. So I like that. And then the interactive training modules up here. You can click on ones that seem relevant to you or sound interesting. They will have awareness tips. So these are like quick cheat sheets, which I realize that's the print button. But I realize it may be hard to read, but basically it's kind of cool, because in this one, social engineering red flags, it'll show you in the middle of the screen, it shows you a email that you may have received. And it will say, okay, now here's what you should be thinking about whenever you look at the from header. Here's what you should be thinking about whenever you see the to header. Here's what you should be thinking about when, you know, when it says this in the subject. So it kind of breaks everything down, and in my opinion is fairly easily digestible, which is important.
Yeah, it's a lot of information, but I would go through it in short bits because it's really, really helpful. And there's a game, I've forgotten which one that is, probably. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
And as always, definitely ask questions. I'll be here again, as I said. If you go through this, which, you know, you can go through it tonight or whenever, and you have any questions about any of the different modules, you can always let Mary know, and she's actually way more into this than she'll let on, and she can answer it, or she will contact me, and then I can explain it, you know.
Well, and I'm going to encourage everyone, if they have any problems with any of the information that Tim provided, which was very, very helpful, to come tomorrow for Tech Drop-In, where he will be here from 12 to 1 and will answer all your questions.
That's one-on-one, right?
That's one-on-one, yes.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Any last questions from anybody?
I have a question.
Oh, Linda has a question.
Perfect.
Tim, I'm getting emails. One of them said that I visited a porn site, which I of course never did. And I get emails about men's enhancement, you know, tricks and Ukraine women, and I block those. But is that something that my I don't know how I get those. I don't know how to stop them.
Yeah, so basically what can happen, to borrow an old and archaic term, is somehow your email got added to a Rolodex. And what people will do, what spammers will do, is they will buy mass quantities of these email accounts. And then they will just send out emails, hoping you'll click on stuff. So one thing I encourage, and I realize it's not an incredibly popular opinion for people who don't use Gmail, is to switch to Gmail. Gmail, I've found, is slightly better than average at filtering out those types of messages automatically. Microsoft is also pretty good at spam detection. Things like AOL, Yahoo, your Comcast account aren't as good. Now, if you're getting those on, a quote unquote better email platform that has a little bit more of that security, I always recommend there will be an option to report as spam. One of the things it does is it will intelligently, quote unquote, learn from what you report as spam and filter messages that are similar to that in nature directly into spam for the future. This does take a lot of time. And by a lot of time, I mean like 6 months, a year, to kind of, for your spam filter to kind of get what you're putting out. To do that, and then in addition, you can feel free to delete it. The worst thing you can do is respond to one of those messages. If you respond to the message, what will happen is the spammer won't think, oh, they responded and said to stop. The spammer will think, oh, this is an account with someone who opened the email and interacted with it. Now this email is good to go for tons of other things because it shows that you're willing to open it.
Well, my family has our own domain with Start Logic, Greenwood Biz. And so maybe I should call Start Logic and ask them about it.
You can see what their spam filter options are.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that one, obviously, so I couldn't speak more on that. The other thing, and I realize it's like against some people's internal code, is to, if you ever go away on vacation, don't have like an auto response, because as I said before, with like, this is a general statement. As I said before, with like spam emails, if they get a response, they know it's an active account. If you set up an auto responder saying, hey, I'm away at vacation, contact Susan for XYZ. Now they know, one, this is an active account on your end, and they know Susan's account now too.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And Tim.
So there are a couple of questions in chat, and Joanne had her hand raised.
Okay, I'll go through the questions. Is it wise to click on an unwanted email ad and go to the bottom and select unsubscribe? Again, if you're in here, I apologize. If you are a small business owner, I apologize. So if you get an email and you do not wish to receive emails from that company, if it's a company that you recognize and you've signed up for their emails, feel free to go and hit that unsubscribe. If you then receive emails after that, just mark them as spam. If you're a small business, this will kind of ruin your sender score, which is kind of painful for you. So again, I apologize. So yes, mark as spam. What is the danger of when an email account is hacked and used to send out messages that aren't from the original owner? So sometimes this happens still nowadays. If an email account is hacked and they start sending out messages, basically the best thing to do is, if you know the person, to contact them not through email and say, hey, you should probably get this under control. If they don't get it under control, honestly, you should block them, which is unfortunate. But if their account is hacked, then there's really not much more you can do than let them know. And if they can't fix it, you kind of don't want to be getting spam all the time. And spam, same as junk. Yeah, I mean, technically they're different, but it's kind of simplified to the point where you just mark spam as junk and junk as junk, or spam as junk and junk as spam. It's whatever your email client calls it, and that's what you mark it. How does one unhack one's email? Ooh, this could be an hour-long discussion. I'll say two things. One, change your password. In general, an account is hacked because the person knows the password, or your computer's compromised, in which case, because a lot of people have something like Outlook where they open it up and automatically your email account, activates, so they could, if they have access to your computer, they could send out emails that way. Generally, though, it's because they have your email password, so change that. The other thing to look at is to, my mind turned into a sieve and I'm trying to hold water. The other thing you want to do is you want to check out your filters. You want to make sure that you haven't set up a filter or a mail forwarding, because what they can also do is they can set up like a mail forwarding rule to your email account, where if you ever get email from their account, you will then send it on. Or on the other side, they can set up a filter to whenever you get an email, it will then send that email to them. So you just want to check in the filters and forwarding section of your email account.
May I ask a question about, I have Google, and Google also has the calendar there for me and contacts, and actually they're duplicated on in my Apple software, but if I change my Google, if my mail is hacked, and you said change your email password, that means change my Google password, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, everyone. And Joanne, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I do. I wanted to ask Tim about, did you say earlier about you can block emails to your computer, your Apple computer? Did you say that?
You can, in your email account, you can basically specify if anything is sent from this address to me, just block it.
Okay, so rather than just trying to do it as spam for a whole year, just block those things.
Yep. The annoying thing about that is spammers generally, generate a new email every single time they send a message. So
that's what I wanted to ask, because on the phone, I've been blocking numbers, and I talked to you about it, and they just use a different number.
Yep, they just use a different number every time. So it's kind of difficult to do the block route anymore.
And even when I haven't clicked on something, the attachment just comes through on the phone, so that even without clicking it, that stuff already shows up.
If you open the email, it will start to load the attachment, but generally
I didn't open the email. The thing came through, and there was a photo attached that just came through. I didn't open it. It just, do you know what I mean? It was just, I didn't, tap on it or anything. So I was kind of confused how that happened.
I mean, if the account or the application you're using to receive emails, if it automatically loads anything, then that can happen, but you generally have to scroll through it in order for it to load, which is generally by like clicking on it,
right,
or something of that nature.
It was an iMessage.
Oh, iMessage. Yeah, that's different. iMessages will automatically load the message in your chat client.
Okay, so you can't do anything like except limit it to contacts that you have or anything like that.
Yep. So if you're getting like spam messages in iMessage, you can do like, I believe it's still a long press, and then you can mark as spam, and then it will go in your iMessages spam folder. And it will also learn from that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tim. This was an amazing class.
Yes, thank you.
Please feel free to, I will send out the recording and the slides and all the links, and feel free to email me with questions or drop in to see Tim tomorrow or every Wednesday from 12 to 1. Our next class is in 2 weeks, and it's on computer maintenance. Also an important subject.
And as always, if you learned something from this class, but you want to learn more about a specific thing. So for example, if you want to learn more about firewalls or password management or something like that, let Mary know, and then we'll put together a specific class kind of on that specific topic.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you, everyone.